Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another tutorial. In this one I'm teaching you how to create a Google login option for your website. So you do see sometimes on websites there's a continue with Google button, so that once you click that you can actually sign up with Google instead of entering your email and password. So with that in mind, that's what we're going to create using PHP. Now, of course, you need a server running and PHP on your system, and you can get both. You need a server, a database, and PHP. You can get all three in one package using XAMPP. So just look for XAMPP and download that and install on your system. And once you're done, open the XAMPP control panel, and then make sure Apache and MySQL are running by starting the two services over here. Then you can minimize that. And then to confirm that PHP is running on your system, just type php-v in a command window, and you should see something like that. If you do not see this, but you installed everything, or you installed PHP, just go to your environment variables and make sure that php.exe, the path to your PHP application, is saved there as well. Okay, then you need Composer. Now, the reason we need Composer is this is a dependency manager. What it does is it can download existing PHP code that was created for you to extend your application. Like, for example, Google has an SDK, or a development kit that they require you to use when you're creating such things. Now, instead of downloading this with a zip file, you can just use Composer instead. It makes the process much easier as well. So install Composer, just Google it, get composer.org, and download. So all this is free. Once you are done installing, just test it by saying Composer-V, and if you see the version there, then you know Composer is installed on your system. Right, guys, now after that you have to create a folder, a project folder. So you have to go to your htdocs folder. This is inside C XAMPP htdocs. In case you installed XAMPP elsewhere, that's where you look for the htdocs folder. Inside the htdocs folder, create a folder called OAuth login, or you can name it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. This is just a project folder, and in this folder yours will be empty to start with, so don't mind. These three items here, vendor and composer, will be created by Composer. So what you do once you're in this folder, just open a command window. So you have that command window, and just navigate to the folder that's your project folder, and then in there you can type Composer to download the I have it saved right here. So this is what you're going to type just to download the Google API client. Okay, so while you're there, you just type like Composer. I think if you're using Linux, you may have to type sudo or something. So once you do this, it's going to download what is required. However, for me, I already did this, so it's just updating. So it's not going to take so much time. And once for you, it will download and extract the files. Once that is complete, you should have these three items in there: vendor folder, composer.json, and composer.log. All right, so now let's create our project files. Okay, so we need the actual code. But before we do that, let's create a database that we can use to store our user information once we get it. So you can do that using the these commands over here. Now I'm going to use now you can use phpMyAdmin to create your database. So let's see how that works. You go to your browser and type localhost/phpMyAdmin, and it will bring you here. You can click on new to create a new database, but I'm going to use code instead. So what I'm going to do is the same command window. I'm just going to type MySQL. Let me clear the screen first, then let me type MySQL. And if you type -u, that's your username. The username is by default is root, and -p, which means I want to enter my password here. Now the password is empty space, so I'm just going to press enter. It will ask me to enter the password. I'll press enter again. So with that, we've entered the MySQL application. So now in here we can run actual queries. So here what I can do is I can just grab this one. So it's create database OAuth_demo. Now you can name the database anything you like. This is just the name I decided to use. So make sure you have that semicolon at the end and press enter. So just with that, we've created a new database, and you can confirm this inside the this section here. If I refresh the page, there will be a new database here, OAuth_demo. Okay, so now we want to use OAuth_demo here. So that's the command we type here, because as you can see here, there is none inside this, which means no database is selected. So let's just say use OAuth_demo, and database has been changed like that. Okay, so as you can see, it's in there. Now what I can do is create a database, a table, sorry, for users. Now when you're creating a table, this is the syntax for creating that in MySQL. So we need an ID. That ID will be of type integer, and it's going to auto increment. That way we don't have to worry about duplicate IDs. And then this will be the primary key. So this is the ID we're going to use to search for user data. And then we're going to put the auth provider column. Now you only need this if you're going to be using some other auth provider like Facebook or maybe Apple or something, or Microsoft, because they all have those provisions. So just in case, you can add that. And then there's an auth ID that is given to the user, and then we'll have the username, the name that we're going to get from their Google account, and their email, and then their photo as well, and then when this account was created. Okay, so simple and straightforward. These are variable characters of length 100 and length 50 here. So let's just copy that and paste it here. Now you don't have to do this. You can just manually do this in PHP-MyAdmin, but I like doing it here. Make sure the semicolon is at the end and press enter. Okay, and just like that, there will be a new table in there. If I click in there, there's a users table, and if I click, you will see it there. We could confirm this without going to PHP-MyAdmin by just saying describe users. And it's going to show you that there is a table that exists called users in that database, and this is its description, right? Then you can try to run some queries, select all from users to see if there's any records, and there is none. All right, so that is done. Since we have that, now we can create an index page. So let's go ahead and create an index page. So this is how the index page looks like. So I've gone ahead and done the typing so that we speed things along. So you put your PHP tags, you do session start, and the reason we do session start is so we can save data that is inside sessions, which means this data will be available once we save it in our page, even after a few days. That's how we know if a user is logged in or not. We save data in the session, because the session only dies when you close the browser and not when you move to another page. We need persistent data to know. Instead of asking the user on every page if they are logged in or not, we save the information in the session. All right. So here we check if the user data is set in the session, and if it's not, we redirect the user to the login page. This is how we redirect, using the header function. And then we have to make sure we exit after we redirect, because it's very possible to set these headers, but if we don't exit, PHP will still run all the way to the bottom here. It might cause problems. So just make sure you add that. Now, if they are logged in, that is, so we're going to say user is equal to whatever is in that session, and then we just display it here. So literally what we are showing here on the index page is just welcome, and then the username and their email address, and hopefully their photo. And then we'll have a logout button. All right. So let's try this and load it in our browser. So I'm going to go to my browser, and I'm going to type localhost because that's my server. And then I'm going to type the OAuth login because that's the folder we are in, and then press enter. It's going to load the index page by default. So if I press, and this is what happens. Now, as you can see, this is the login.php page because we were redirected to the login page immediately because we are not logged in. So let's take a look at this login page. So after you create the index page with this code here, create the login page. So login.php, and this is what we're doing. So we're requiring a file in here called config. We're going to check what's inside config in a sec. But for now, this is just a simple HTML with a title there and the heading, and then some instruction here. And then all I'm doing is creating a link here to my other file called Google callback.php. Now you can name this file anything you want. It doesn't have to be this. It's just a file that's right here. We're going to check what's inside there. And then there's just this image we are getting from the internet. So you can put your own image here. You don't have to use this one. Just put an image that tells the user, this is the image right there, that tells the user to click on it. Okay, so that's really it. It's just a button on this one, and then the config .php thing here. Now let's go ahead and look at this file we're adding to the top of our page, which is config. So inside config, of course, we are starting the session, so we can use that. And then inside the here we're making a connection to the database. So we are using MySQL as a connector, and then we have to supply the host name. So if this was an online website, you'd put your server IP there, or the MySQL server IP, and then the username and password. Since our default username is root and empty password, this is what we do. And then this is our database name. Now, if when installing MySQL, you added a username and password, so just add those here instead of these. Now, if we don't connect, we're going to get an error saying unable to connect to the database. But if we get to this point, it means everything went well. So here what we're going to do is just define a few constants that we're going to use in the application. So Google client, we're going to need the client ID, we're going to need the client secret, and we're going to need the redirect URL. Now this one is the URL we're going to be redirected back once we do once Google is done collecting that user's information. It has to redirect us back somewhere. So this is where we're redirecting. So I have to add my HTTP in there. And then since we're redirecting to localhost, and then our folder, and then that very file, the Google callback.php, which is right there. Okay. So we're going to get these from Google, from our Google account once we create a Google app. Okay, so this is all we need in this page. Now let me go to the logout page. Now in the logout page, all we are doing is just destroying the session. Now we have to start the session so we can destroy it and then redirect to our login page. We don't really need the exit function, but in case you have some other code down here, who knows, but you don't really need that because there's nothing left here anyway. So we redirected to the login page. It's as simple as that. So that's that. So we've done the login, the index, login, logout. and the config file. So now the Google callback. So what this one does, this is the main code for doing all of this. So what it's going to do is we're going to require the config.php. Now the reason we require that is so we can connect to our database, because this is where we do connect the data to the database, and this is where we have our constants set. So, and then we're going to require the vendor from the one we downloaded using Composer. So if you check in that folder, there's this vendor folder here. So inside this vendor folder, there is the SDK, or the development kit from Google. So you don't have to worry about the files in there. It's just that inside vendor, there is an autoload.php file always, which is right there. So that is all we need to load, and it's going to load everything that we downloaded using Composer. So that code is going to run in the background. Now we're going to create a new client here, and then say new Google client. So we are creating that new Google client, and then we are setting our client ID. So put that, what's this, the constant, which represents the actual client ID, and then set the client secret, and then set the redirect URL, and then add a scope of what you're trying to get. So we want to get email and basic profile information, so set those. Now once if we are redirected, like once the information is grabbed from the user, we're gonna go here. But if we don't have that information yet, because the difference is that once we, in our URL, there's going to be a get variable called code, right? The URL is going to have a query string with a code there. So if that is not set, that means we haven't yet requested the user to give us the information. So we need to do that. So here we're going to say auth URL is equal to client and create auth URL. So this is going to generate a URL that we have to redirect the user to. That's a Google URL. That way they can select to accept your application to grab their information. So this is what happens here. So once we do that, we are generating the URL, and then we redirect the user to that URL, and then we exit. So once the URL, the user is sent there, they're going to accept everything there if they want to, and then they'll be brought back. Now, once they're brought back, the code will exist then in the URL, because that URL is going to come back with a code. So once that code is back, we're going to use this situation, because we're coming back to this page. So in that situation, everything here will be done again, but then this time we're going to authenticate the user using that code. And once we do that, we're going to get a token, get access token, and then set the access token here. And then here, since we have that code that was brought back, it gives us authority now to actually get user information. And we do that using this line here. So from the auth we create here using this, we're going to say user information get. So this is all part of the Google documentation. You can check that out in the developers section of your Google account. So once we do this part, now we will have user information. And once we do that, we can just store it in the database. So the rest of this here is just saving this data into the database. So here what we're doing is we are using that connection we created in the config file to prepare a statement, because we want to use prepared statements, of course. We don't want to be hacked. So this is the query you create and say select from users. So we're trying to see if this user already exists, so we don't keep adding the same record over and over every time they access our website. So we say select from users where auth ID, and then you use that same auth ID, the user ID that we'll get here. and the auth provider will be Google. So this is only useful if you're gonna use several auth providers. And then here we're just binding, because this is just prepared statement, it doesn't have any values. So we're just binding the user ID to the first value here, which is a string. So we use that S because it's a string. And then we're going to execute that query, and then there will be a result of that query here. Now, if the result is positive, meaning the number of rows returned is not 0, or if they're equal to 0, that is, if there's no result here, we're going to save that data in the database. Because if there was a result, then we don't care about this. We can just skip ahead to this part. So if there was no result, then we do another prepared statement. This time we're inserting into the database. So we insert whatever we got from Google. So these are the columns in that database. We're just trying to match. The order does not matter. What matters is the order between the column names and the values over here. So here we say auth provider is Google, but here we put question marks because we're going to put actual data later through this binding process. So we bind that, and we put these 4 S's here because all these representing these values respectively. Each one of these is a string, so we're going to put all these 4 S's to represent these guys. And then we're going to execute that, which means at this point we would have inserted a user. Okay, so once we insert them into the database, we are good to go. Now we can save that user data in the session. That way, on every page, we will still have access to this information to know whether the user is logged in or not. So we're going to say name, we get that, email, and a picture. And then once we are done, we just redirect to the dashboard. So the dashboard, actually this should be index.php, sorry about that. So we redirect to the index page, which is this one. Now this time, because we will also have to start the session, now this time this is going to be set, so we're not going to go through here. Instead, it's going to go through here, and we're going to show all this information here to the user. So the next step now is to create an application in my Google account. So for that, we're going to go to the cloud account. So here you're going to go to Google Cloud. I think you can just Google this. Google Cloud. Cloud.google.com. Okay, now this is the console. So it's console.cloud.google.com. So here I want to start a new project. So I'm going to click on select a project. So let me create a new project from here. So what name do you want to give? So what name do you want to give to your project? So I'm just going to say MyOath project, just so you know. Then you can select an organization here. I don't have that, so just click create. Now before you get to this point, you may be asked to sometimes Google, depending on the service that you want to get from Google, they may ask you to add your credit card details, for example. So just add those. They're not going to charge you anything. It's just so for future charges. So if you're asked about that, you probably need to do that. But let's create an application here. We're creating a project actually. So the project was created. Now I can select that project. You can select it from here by clicking there again. And now, because if you click there, you have a list of your projects, and then you can tick which project you want. Okay, so with this project now we've created, we need to create an auth screen. So that's the screen that the user will see when they're asked to accept whether to give you access to their information or not. So here with from the menu there, we're going to go to API and services and OAuth consent screen. Okay, so we click there and OAuth overview. It's not configured yet, so let's get started. We click on get started. All right, so let's see your application name here. So this one is what people will see. This is the application that's going to be asking for consent. So here maybe I could just say quick code. I'm just going to call it quick code like that. Now if it's let's say you have a website or something, this will probably be the name of your website so that people know that they're giving consent to the right application, right? The support email, you put your email address there and then you click next. Now with the audience here, I'm going to choose external, so you can read these to figure out what suits you. That I'll choose external there for test users outside of myself. So contact information, email addresses. These email addresses are for Google to notify you about any changes to your project. Okay, so just put whatever email address is suited to that. So next, and then finish. You agree with the terms and conditions and continue, because nobody ever reads those terms and conditions anyway. So let's create that. So the app shall be created, hopefully. So OAuth configuration created. That's great. Okay. So now we need to create an OAuth client. Now, this is where the information we want is going to be. Where is that config file? This Google client ID and client secret will be in that client ID, because as you can see, it says client ID and client secret there. So we need to create those. So create OAuth client. So let me click on that. Let's see what we get. Right, so what type of application are you dealing with? So you have to choose here, is it an Android application, iOS, Chrome extension, and so on. Mine is a web application, so I'm going to click on web. You can name it web client 1. This is just an ID. It's just an ID. Nobody's going to see this. So, but you can be more specific for your own sake. That way you don't get confused which web client is which. So I'm going to name it that. And then now here, there is the add URI. So authorized JavaScript origins, right? In case you're using JavaScript, you need to type the authorized origins here, which is the URLs or the servers that it's going to expect to get information from. So here you can add several, because you can use, you can add your own website. This is the this is essentially to avoid other people abusing your what's this, your API, for example. So let's say, for example, this is something you are paying for with Google, right? Because sometimes these are paid for services, and every time your website makes a request, they charge you for that. Now somebody else could check sometimes in your browser and see the app secret and the client ID and the client secret, and somehow if they grab that information and try to use it on their own website, they could potentially use your services without your consent, because they have the credentials, right? But you can add the origins here so that Google can check, where is this request coming from? Is it coming from your website or not? Then it can refuse service based on that. So you select here which websites are allowed to use this. So in my case, it's just localhost, because we are on our local machine. Now if you have a port number, you could add that port number there. So you can add several of these to include all the websites that you think require this service. So let me delete that. We just need one. And then this is the authorized redirect URIs. so that another user cannot do the same thing and cheat the system and redirect to another. Because what people would do sometimes is they can hijack that returned value from Google and then use it to get other users' information using your app. So to avoid that, you have to save the authorized redirect URIs. Now we do have a redirect URI here that we created, which is that file right there. So I'm just gonna copy this and let's go back here and I'm gonna paste that in there. Okay, great. So you can add another one if you want, but I think this is good, and let's create. Okay, so once we do that, we should have our client ID. So the OAuth access restriction. So this client ID is right here. It's been created. So let's copy that client ID over there, and we're going to paste it over here. Okay. And then let's go and say, okay, we are good to go. Now we have this client over here. Now if I click on that client to see more detail on that client, I get my client ID and client secret. So here I can just copy the client secret and I can paste it there like so. Okay. Alrighty then. So here, of course, you can always edit the information that you want, right? And you can also delete the client ID. Now, this client. Now, the reason you have clients like this is so that, let's say, for example, where I'm doing this tutorial, right? Anybody can now use these credentials that I've added here to abuse the system using my credentials, because they can easily. I've added localhost here, and everybody has localhost on their computer, so they can easily use my client information here. So instead, what I can do, without deleting the entire app, I can just add a new client and then get new details and then delete this particular client, which means nobody has access anymore. So that's the convenience of these web clients. They're just a convenient way to revoke and add new access and so on, if you suspect abuse, that is. So I'm going to keep that in. And so that's all we need to do pretty much. So let's test our situation here and see if it's going to work. So here I'm going to click sign in with Google. So this is my login page. I'm going to refresh just in case. Just make sure my internet is working. Internet is terrible today. Let me sign in with Google. So I'm going to click that Google thingy. And you see this is the URL that was generated from that request, and then we redirected the user to that URL. And then they end up, it brings you here. Now continue to quick code. As you can see here, this is the application that we created there. It's appropriately named. So the user can choose an account that they want to use. And then once they select that, it redirects them properly to sign into quick code. Are you sure you want to do this? Continue or cancel. And then I'm going to say continue. All right. And there we go. Look at that. So now the user is logged in. We know their name and we know their email address. Not sure why the image is broken, but maybe we don't have access to that information. I do not know. But what's important is the username and the email, because once they have that, you can use these details to sign them in. And let's check that out in our database. Since we already have this, let's run our query again, select all from users. Let's see what it brings back now. And as you can see, it brings back more information. Let me remove the picture and date created at. So I'm just going to say, instead of select all, let's choose specific columns. I'm going to say ID, name, that's all I care about, and email. Okay, so there we go. This is the result that we got from there. So there is a record in our database. We can check that and confirm in our PHP MyAdmin by clicking browse, and you can see there's information here for that particular user. Now, if we go here, there's a logout button, right? So if I click logout, I again am logged out. So if I try to go back there, it just brings me back to the login page. Now, if I try to sign in this time with Google, it's not going to bring that whole screen again. It's just going to log me in immediately like that, right? Because Google actually skips that process and just provides the information immediately. So that simplifies the process because the user has already given consent. We don't need to show them that thing. Now, before I go, one more piece of information. Right now, your app will not work if you try to use it online because it's not published. So what you need to do is go to audience here. When you're on your app situation, this is where you publish the app. So it's going to need a vetting process. They're going to need to verify your app and so on. This time it's in testing mode, right? So while it's in testing mode, you can test this with some other users by simply adding them here. So you add some users that you're going to use for testing. So if you've got friends, you can add the email addresses here, and it's going to allow them to test this. All right, before you publish it. Then when you're done with everything and know it's working well, you can hit the publish app and follow the instructions that follow after that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have learned something from this tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next tutorial.